Morning, everyone. When I sort of asked Rich about having a slot here for doing Felix again, there was sort of a trepidation about Phil Winship bumping his gums again about Felix. Haven't we heard enough? Well, no, you haven't. Basically, it's a long story. It's still going. We are actually at the deployment phase, so we're actually using machines in anger. They're deploying out in this year for 4 machines, which we'll talk about a little bit further. So it isn't a case about what we've done, how we've done it in terms of the development of the machine. It's actually at this stage where it's quite important stepping away from the deployment, the actual development of the machine, to how we actually use it in anger, get out there with the actual people on site, show them what it can do. Because a lot of people have heard about what it can actually do and what the actual technology can do, but actually seeing it in physically embedded into actual day-to-day work is clearly a challenge to make sure that people aren't scared of it, because it's quite a big step change from using a track gauge to using this particular machine. So for those who haven't seen Felix before, that's it in a nutshell. It's obviously an automated measuring machine, as it shows there. Lots of different measurements and parameters it does. So a lot of change in terms of the actual use of this machine, in terms of moving away from what we do now manually now and trying to actually embed a big change in shift in terms of how we actually assess S&C and what it's actually inspected by and how we actually use that data. The big thing for this machine is actually the amount of data it records, the actual data it provides, and what we do with it. We're always talking about data and wanting to actually know this, wanting to know that. We're rich in data by lots and lots of different mechanisms that we use, but actually using that data correctly to advantage and making sure it's easier for the TME to manage its asset and look at the asset from a strategic point of view at a regional engineer level. This is what this machine can help do if the data is used correctly. So it's not just about actually saying, well, 053, for example, is the big thing that people look at in this terms of this machine, because yes, it does do all of those things, but it's much more than that. There's a lot more that this machine does than just looking at whether you've got a switch derailment risk or not. So what is Felix itself? It's a huge change for a lot of people to get their head around. So at the moment, we use manual inspection gauges, lots of different types of gauges that people use, and obviously individuals are using those gauges and they're out there making decisions on what their perception is of what that gauge shows them. So the P8 profile, for an example, when you're looking at how that wheel rail interface point of contact is measured, it's all down to that person on that night, because obviously a lot of this is done on nights in the dark now, making that decision just by actually visually looking at it. Is he making the right decision? Is he making the wrong decision? Each of us could have a go at doing this and we'd all come up with maybe a different answer. Who's right, who's wrong? If you're using something like Felix, it's taking that decision-making process away from a human factor point of view. It's making that decision consistently, time and time again, using the same algorithms, using the same methodology of assessing that particular parameter and giving you a consistent result. So whether it fails or whether it passes, the machine is not lying. It will tell you what the actual result is. The problem we've got obviously with human factors is that people think it's a machine. I'll just get my track gauge out and I'll check that. That's not the behaviour that actually we think about. But obviously, because this is such a big change, people are a little bit reluctant to actually take it forward. They want to actually try it before they buy it, I suppose is the phrase I've heard before. We've proven the technology with time and time again with lots of work, which James will go on to, showing a little bit more about what we've done with that. The actual deployment and using the machine in anger is the planning, the process of actually getting it on track, moving it through S&C in a way that's efficient to get the measurements done as quickly as possible, and looking at the data and making sure we actually exploit as much as we can from that. So I was thinking, how can I sort of try and actually look at some sort of parallel in terms of what everybody's gone through in a change in their lives, and what actually could I choose to actually try and demonstrate where things are in parallel with Felix to a point, but clearly looking at what we do over our lives. I thought, banking. When I was a kid, and yes, I was quite small once, my mum used to have to go down to the bank every week and draw out cash. She used to queue up, take me with her, going into the bank, get the cash out of the actual over the counter. She put it in her purse, and that was her cash for the week. Probably people a bit older in the tooth like me at the minute, maybe you remember those days. Who want to go back and do that now? Do you want to actually then start actually joining the queue of plethora of people to actually say, I want my wad of £10 notes for the week and I'll go away and spend it and I'll come back next week and do exactly the same thing. Nobody would look at that and go, yeah, I think I want to go back to doing that. So banking itself has gone through a metamorphosis in terms of we've moved away from that. Yes, you can still go to your branch, but obviously quite often they direct you to a machine. It's not often you can speak to a person, even if you're looking at going online. It's not often you can get hold of a single person to talk to if you've got an issue. But we moved away to ATMs. They obviously still exist. So everybody gets their cash out from the ATM machine, or used to do, moan and groan when it was out of service or ran out of money. But we didn't go back into the bank and actually say, I'm going to start queuing up for my money again. Then we moved forward again, the banking moved to actually looking at using your card machines. We still use those, but obviously the first way of doing it was having a magnetic strip on the back, sliding it through the actual machine. Then obviously looking at next developed chip and pin, which we still use now. Obviously then we've got the put your card on top of it now with the actual chip in it, and everything's all done automatically. And now we're back to more technology updates, going on the internet. So hands up, who's got an internet bank account? Who would want to go back to queuing at a bank to get your cash out? Who uses cash these days? Who spent some money in cash terms this week? Yep, very, very small number. So a number of times I haven't used cash. I've got some in my wallet that actually used to be in there for about 3 months. I haven't used it. So that's technology for you in that sector, and it's affected every single one of us. If we go back to actually looking at ourselves with Felix, what have we done over the years with all the gauges? We've not really done an awful lot in changing actually what we do with measurement for 053 in particular. We had a Pac-Man gauge. It moved to that little extra, slightly larger piece of equipment there to slightly a better ergonomic design. Still has the same pitfalls of using that gauge. It's, to be honest, pretty useless in terms of actually getting a regular and consistent result for that. Track gauges, we started off with those. P8 profile had one line on it for 60 degrees. Great change, we moved away in 2012, 2011, put a different P8 profile on with 3 lines on it. Great technology innovation. Not really. Obviously, that's very small step changes we've made. And I come along and go, I've got a great big machine actually that does all this for you. It does it with lasers, it does it with cameras. That's a great change for people to get their head around. And clearly it's a big step change from using your manual gauges to get across to people that using this particular machine is going to give you a lot of issues that you need to get your head around how you're going to use the data, rather than actually stepping away from manual gauges and looking at this machine as something that's a bit frightening. So we're trying to go on a journey in looking at how we can actually support people to actually use this machine. So we're taking all these gauges that were on the left-hand side there. Felix does all of those measurements with those gauges. So it's about 8 gauges that can actually be replicated in terms of what it does. An awful lot of gauge measurements that we do, and all the manual human factor issues taken away and decisions made by that machine, which we've got to trust. So what we've done in the last 18 months, quite a lot. I'm not going to read through all those, you can look at those yourselves, but obviously it's not just a stepping stone of saying we've got the product approval for this machine, okay, everybody, here it is, if you want to buy it, you can do, and we walk away. We've got to support the introduction of it and make sure we embed it in the business where we can do, to make sure people see the benefits, and hopefully more people start using this machine and start ordering it, rather than actually just walking away and thinking that, okay, we've done our bit, it's now for people to actually deploy it and start using it, regardless of actually whether they've got the experience or not. So we're here, as a project team, supporting that with the 4 machines that we've got coming into the actual system. So effectively, we've got 4 units that were bought by the RD&I team in TA. So they actually have been allocated to Sussex, Wessex, Anglia and Scotland. And they're going to be actually deployed by the end of this year to all of those routes. And we're looking at how we can actually turn around and looking at giving a project team some support to actually look at embedding that, planning how they use it, looking at the best options, rather than actually them thinking, great machine, how am I going to fit it into what I've got now? It's a different way of thinking about how you use that technology, rather than just trying to supplement it in terms of what you do with manual gauges. So it's obviously looking at that mindset and understanding how we can change that. So Sussex have obviously started deploying. They've been deployed for about 2 months now. James is here to actually give you a little bit of feedback about his experience, good and bad. It's not all smooth sailing. I'm not going to tell you it's all been fantastic. Everything's not actually been a problem. There's been good things, there's been bad things. We've actually worked to actually try and improve things as we've gone along. So we've learned as we actually have been deploying. I'll hand over to James just to give you a bit of user frontline experience.
Hi there. So Sussex so far, been to 14 junctions within 6 delivery units. It's 26 shifts, 82 individual point-end inspections. It's found 98 defects, of which 13 were band-facing moves. So I have a case study, some of the information that Felix can produce. This is looking at info from the test case as well as since going live, and it's the switch profile angle. And we're looking at Horsham and 2016 alpha points. So the first inspection was February 23. You can see on the white line there is the switch profile. And at this point in time, hasn't reached the defect threshold. The next inspection was May 23. As you can see there from the red circle, it's now reached a 55-degree P8 failure. So that's a band facing moves. Within the same shift, we had that ground and rectified. And then January 24, this is after we went live. The next inspection, you can see the wear has increased again. The switch angle has began to get shallower. And then last weekend, I actually did another inspection. Again, the wear's increased. And now that angle is getting down towards 61 degrees. So I pass this information on to the Horsham management team. So it makes people aware of the condition of the switch before there's a failure. So we can utilize this to make them aware. They can pay attention to this switch, look ahead at what access they have, look at booking maintenance grinds so that we're not having surprise failures that can cause service delays. So Sussex successes, we're accurately and objectively identifying the defects. So this takes out, as Phil said, like human error and the questioning of results. We're developing more effective working practices, completing mentorship of newly trained staff, promoting confidence in the technology, working with the different DUs, helping to complete their MST inspections, so reducing the workload and helping inspections not to go into backlog. We have a positive working relationship with the supplier, and as users and the project team, always being proactive. All this is added up to improving asset condition, extending the lifespan of the asset, increasing the safety from the asset and obviously the individuals doing the inspections as well, increasing productivity and efficiency, providing more confidence and accurate data, adding to staff competencies and reducing the workload. Some of the issues that we've encountered, the technical issues, we liaise with Lachoni to rectify these and put in place plans so that they don't occur again. Heavy grease at certain locations has affected the performance of Felix, so we had a flange adaptation so that it is less likely to pick up grease. Reflections, which is the image there on the camera, this made the results unusable, so a software update has rectified this. Lack of trained staff, obviously this is an ongoing process, and the more staff we have trained, just the more productive and effective we can be on shift. The competency is not live with Network Rail, so at the moment any defects found we have to confirm with a live competency, which is the 053 competency. And initially lack of location knowledge as we move around the different depots, but obviously as we go to these locations, that knowledge is increasing and becoming less of a factor. So future plans in Sussex, looking at a dedicated team to run Felix, training, like I said, more staff, increasing productivity, improve the planning. This will make it more visible and bringing it in line with the planning process that is currently implemented. Having a dedicated van for transportation means we can carry more equipment and in a safer way. Develop the information packs. So as the different regions deploy, we can help them with the lessons that we've learned and then keep that relationship going as we all develop. Use the data that Felix provides to increase the amount of inspections that it can do. So each pass of an S&C, we're getting more benefit from it. Potentially looking at updating standards, as it does the same inspection as a manual, but in a very different way. And lastly, and most probably importantly, look to move to evidence-based, proactive and not reactive maintenance schedule.
So there's a lot of work going on with James' team. He's obviously doing an awful lot of the inspections himself, so a lot of information we're getting from that. A lot showing themselves in terms of the technical issues we've had. It's things like where the machines maybe lost contact because there's a Wi-Fi thing between the machine and the control. And that was down to one of the actual tarpaulin things on the actual machine, which is a cover. So it was a bit of dirt had got in there. So it's things like that where we're learning that actually if you get a bit of dirt in certain areas, then might actually throw up a fault. So there's lots of faults that Felix can sense on its systems. What Lotchoni have done is put a screen on the actual iPad that shows all those fault codes. Yes, whether they're green or red, and then it'll identify that. So that's been a thing that actually has helped forward. So one thing that James hasn't mentioned in terms of what's happened over the time it's been out there being deployed on those switches. We've had a couple of occasions where it's actually been used on a switch that's been identified as having a defect, and then they've gone back over that switch after the repair's been carried out. Showed an example of one, obviously. But there have been two occasions where the welding team have been given a task to do to repair a switch. They've gone out and done that, but they've used manual gauges to check where that defect is, even though Felix can tell them from the toe where they need to be in terms of the defect that they're looking to repair. So they've gone out on two occasions. Felix has been used again after that to actually assess whether how the repair's gone, and it's been found that they actually have repaired the switch in the wrong place. So that's obviously two occasions in one route. How often is that happening elsewhere? And that's the fallibility of using manual gauges. So it's proving its point in terms of where we are with that. So looking at what's going on to deployment, we've obviously got these barriers. The culture is the biggest thing for us. We need the resources sorted out, and obviously inspections and classifying the actual inspections themselves, and looking at the data to move forward to, as James has said, a more proactive maintenance strategy for looking at the data itself and using that in terms of getting the efficiencies that we can see we can actually get with this. And looking strategically ahead, so they look at degradation rates, how it changes from one to the next inspection. Whereas at the moment we can't. We just use a gauge, put it down, it says that, that's what we see and that's what we record at the time. So Daisy Damon, who's sadly not here, she's got a better offer of a holiday in Rome, I think, at the minute this weekend. So she set up communities of practice. We've got a national one which Daisy chairs. We're setting up some individual routes, and obviously where we're going to deploy, it's a key thing to try and look at getting people's buy-in with this, understanding what it can do, how we can actually basically help each other, as James said, sharing knowledge, good and bad, is how we can take that forward. We've also got a pre-deployment toolkit, so we're not just leaving it to people to take away the machine and obviously look at helping themselves as to how they actually take it from a piece of kit that's just been delivered to them to getting it out on site. So lots of information we've put together with the project team led by Daisy in terms of helping each of these routes to get the best out of starting the planning and what they need to be thinking about and helping them through that. So in terms of next steps, where we are at the minute, we're obviously looking at the Anglia route, the Wessex route and the Scottish route in terms of looking at getting those further machines out there. We've been commissioning those machines. I think we've got one left to do at the moment in terms of that. But ultimately, we'll get more data, more experience as we go through the deployment of these 4 machines to then actually look at more experience about getting the rest of the business to see this as a positive, hopefully, and look at maybe getting a bigger fleet of machines across the regions to actually look at getting the benefits and understanding how they can actually gain better understanding of their asset and being able to assess it. One last thing, just before we finish, I went to the Innovations, it was Innovations Day at Eastern Region on Tuesday, and Leela Tachi, she was the Director of Asset Management and Track Director in Eastern Region. Probably I've got her actual title not quite correct, but her 3 bullet points for actually wanting to actually look at innovation is understanding the asset. So in other words, looking at what we got, how is it actually working, what should it be working like, understanding the data and making use of it and making best use of that, and making sure that we actually are making the best decisions we can and we understand the impact those decisions are going to have on the business. And I think, to be honest, when she said those 3 points, Felix fits quite nicely in most of those in terms of if it can be used correctly, if it's deployed in the way it needs to be, we can get the data and we can assess it and use that in a different way to thinking how we use it now, then we're going to get that efficiency, we're going to get that benefit. So thank you very much.